It's time for another episode of Espresso Yourself with Chuck. And now, coming to the mic, your host, Chuck.
If you've ever watched a courtroom drama or you've been in a courtroom, you have seen the person that's typing on this interesting little machine that's not a typewriter, but looks somewhat similar to that. That is a court reporter or a stenographer. We're going to learn a whole lot more about that today on this episode of Espresso Yourself with Chuck. Welcome, Cindy Fenton.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my profession.
Well, I'm really excited about it because, as I mentioned in the intro, I've watched numerous movies, programs, and the court reporter's been there, and the judge will ask the court reporter to read something back or, something like that. And you see the machine, and it looks odd, and I have never understood it. It seems like a shorthand type of thing. My mother actually knew shorthand. But I'm interested in the profession and certainly interested in how you got interested in the profession. But before that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and then how you developed the interest for being a court reporter?
Certainly. I've been a court reporter for 45 years. I knew I wanted to go to college, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And a local court reporter came and spoke to my Greg shorthand class. That dates me a little bit. I'm sure that's the kind of shorthand your mother used too. I don't remember much of that. I pushed that aside in learning steno. But I grew up in a small town, Ulysses, Kansas. And I now live just 45 minutes from there and work in Garden City / Holcomb is where I live, but it's just a little bedroom community outside of Garden City. And I actually travel from the Oklahoma state line to the Nebraska state line and Colorado to, I cover the western third of Kansas, really. So I travel quite a bit for depositions, sometimes 2.5 hours one way. And wow. In fact, I'll be doing that on Monday.
You mentioned that someone came and talked to you about this profession. And I think you said when you were in high school at Ulysses High School.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Were you undecided at that time what you wanted to do? You knew you wanted to go to college. You weren't sure what, but when you heard about this profession, was it an immediate attraction to this job, or were you weighing other options? And if so, how did you finally decide court reporting was the path?
Good questions, because I was a junior in high school, and when she came and spoke to us, and that's the first time that I knew that was even a job. They didn't show court reporters in movies or TV back then. And so I just didn't even, that wasn't something wasn't even anywhere on my radar. And I actually considered chemical engineering and accounting also. And when I learned more about court reporting, found out that I didn't have to go to a 4-year university to become a court reporter. I had to, and there was at that time in Salina, Kansas, at Brown Mackie College, they had, it was a business college, and they had a court reporting program. And it cost a lot less than going to a 4-year university. And I would be out of school in 18 months to 3 years instead of 4. And start out making as much money as I was willing to work. When my first job out of court reporting school was in San Antonio, I decided I wanted to live somewhere else besides Kansas, see what that was like. And I worked for a freelance firm there. And at that time, I was making more money than the attorneys that were fresh out of law school and had gone to college for 7 years. The money and the flexibility played a part in me deciding to go into court reporting. And I was good at typing, and I played the piano and clarinet, and those skills helped me to be good at writing on a shorthand machine.
Is the program still 18 months to 3 years, or has the program changed over the years?
The places where there are programs for court reporting school have changed, but the program itself is still the same. I actually went to school with 2 gals that I'm still very good friends with that got out of court reporting school in just barely over a year. I wasn't that good at that time, and I was working part-time, and they did not. They were going to school full-time. So it took me longer. It took me 3 years. But once I left my part-time job and started concentrating on school, then I was able to complete it.
If someone was interested in going into court reporting, are there several institutions or training programs in the state of Kansas where they could look into that?
There are a lot of online programs. I say a lot, but 2 or 3 at least. And the best way to find those is to go to National Court Reporters Association's website. So Google National Court Reporting Association, and that you will find several online programs and accredited schools across the nation. The one that I really recommend at this time is operated by a court reporter. Her name is Allie Hall in Oklahoma, and she has a school in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa. And that's where I highly recommend students in Kansas to go. There's a court reporting institute, Kansas Court Reporting Institute, I think is the name of it, in Kansas City, that's been there for 20 or 30 years. That's an alternative also.
Online, I'm trying to think how this works. Do you have to purchase a machine, and then you get the machine, and then your instruction is online, and you I guess do lessons, and obviously they teach you the basics in the beginning, but do you need a machine from day one to do this training?
You do. You have to have a shorthand machine, and I can show you mine. This screen actually shows what you write.
What we can't see is the detail on the keys. So can you tell us or explain to us, well, maybe there's nothing on the key. Do you just have to know what each key does, or are there hints on each of the keys? And obviously you learn all of this in the training, but I'm curious because it looks like one of the keys is really large, and so it's a different kind of device.
Yes.
And then you've got the 4 keys on the bottom. So are there different word groupings? Can you tell us just basically how that works? Give us your 3 years of training in a 2-minute description.
Okay. When you start school, you learn the keyboard, and the keyboard are flat keys. They don't have anything written on them.
Okay.
The purpose of that is if you have to look at the keys to see which key is which letter, you're already behind. So you learn that keyboard like a computer keyboard. You learn to write without looking at those keys. And the first 3 months I was in school was in theory class. You're learning the shorthand. And after that, then you start building your speed. You start out, the first speed class is 80 to 100 words a minute. And that's really slow. And you have to build your speed until you can get certified at 225 words a minute. People generally speak 180 to 230 on an average, I would say. Although now with our computer equipment, we can see how fast we are writing. And there are some times that some people are at 270 to 300. And I stop them and ask them to slow down if I can't keep up, and that's a lot of times that is when they are speaking over each other, and that becomes very difficult to keep up. I have the authority, and I don't mind telling them to slow down and talk one at a time.
So I guess theoretically, you don't necessarily have to have the experience you had with being a trained typist or having the musical instrument dexterity. Certainly that would be helpful. But if
Yes.
someone hadn't taken keyboarding, they could still do this. It just might be more of, it might take them a little bit longer to figure it out. Is that fair?
Well, I think that those things that I listed just proves my dexterity with my fingers, but that doesn't mean that someone that hasn't played piano doesn't have that dexterity also. I should explain that there are different types of different parts of our profession. I worked as a freelance court reporter in San Antonio for 3.5 years, and then I wanted to get closer to home. I really wanted to be in West Texas, but there weren't any, and I wanted to work at a courthouse, and which provides a steady paycheck and benefits and paid vacations and all of that. And there weren't any openings at that time in West Texas, but there was an opening in Garden City, Kansas, which is basically where I live now. And so I went to work at the courthouse in Garden City, and I worked there for 12.5 years. And then I left the courthouse in September of 94 and started my own freelance business. And my office is at home. That's where I am right now. And I travel all over, like I said, taking depositions I'm never in a courtroom anymore with the judge. And people get very confused about that. When I say court reporter, they think that I'm in a courtroom.
But
and
you're still working on behalf of the court or the judicial system.
Yes,
so
very
can
much.
You explain what a deposition is?
In a lawsuit, just like in everyday life, there's always two sides to every story. And let's say you're the plaintiff and I'm the defendant. We both have a lawyer. My lawyer cannot call you and ask you questions about the lawsuit without your lawyer present, and vice versa. Your lawyer can't call me and ask me questions about the lawsuit without my lawyer present. So the most efficient way for them to find out what the other side of the story is, to evaluate their case so that they can effectively counsel their client, is to take their deposition. And we could be having a deposition right now. Since COVID especially, there have been a lot of Zoom depots. And I've taken depots in courthouses and conference rooms in attorneys' offices and banks and feed yards. And I'm careful about what I wear when I go to a feedlot. I'm telling you that, but I've been to one more than once. But just, you can have a deposition anywhere. And I swear in the witness, so they are under oath, just like they were in front of a judge in the courtroom. And not only does your lawyer get to know what my side of the story is, I'm locked into that story because I was under oath and there's a transcript of it. So if we go to trial and today I say the light was green, and at the trial I say the light was red, your lawyer's going to pull out that transcript and go, well, at your deposition you said it was green, now you're saying it's red, which one is it? And that impeaches my testimony. And that's the purpose of a deposition.
So they're very significant pieces of evidence, or can be,
yes,
in the trial, and certainly in preparation for the trial.
Yes. They also learn from the deposition what other possible witnesses they may need to depose or call to trial to testify, so that they have a complete rounded picture of the lawsuit and the facts surrounding it.
How many depositions do you think you have done over your career?
I have no clue. Probably thousands. And I did a lot of jury trials when I was at the courthouse, and plenty of murder trials included in that. And I was also, when I was in San Antonio, I also covered a good portion of the federal grand jury proceedings there.
Well, you mentioned a murder trial, the stress level associated with, well, one, making sure you're getting accurate words in the system, but then maybe hearing some of the testimony too. And probably well, tell me, so let's say it's a murder trial and you're hearing this testimony. What is your approach? Are you blocking out kind of the gory details and just you're focused on getting the words in there? What is your frame of mind when you're doing that? And I assume that's part of your training and preparation, but what's that process like with the job itself, and then emotionally, focusing on doing the job as opposed to getting wrapped up in the details of the trial?
The name of the game in this profession is concentration. You have to have very good concentration skills in order to make an accurate record verbatim, which means word for word of the proceedings. It's just a matter of concentration. And yeah, you just kind of have to sometimes concentrate on the words and not what they mean some days. I enjoyed the 12 and a half years I was at the courthouse, but I'm more suited for a freelance lifestyle and the content, the things that I hear. I heard a lot of very interesting things, and one of the murder trials that I covered when I was in the court system was a woman that had murdered 7 children, 6 of whom were her own. The first 6 happened in Texas, and they were in different counties. They weren't all in the same county, so it didn't throw up any red flags to anyone. And then she had her son, when she was living in Garden City, was 4 years old at the time, and she would suffocate them is what she would do. They think probably with a pillow. And she had a syndrome called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And so she did this to gain sympathy from people. She wanted the attention focused on herself, I guess. And she would do that, kill them, and then run to the emergency room. That's what she did in Garden. She ran him to took him to the emergency room, carrying him in her arms, running inside, help me, and they worked on him, but they could not revive him. He'd been dead for too long already. No telling how long. But they recognized petechiae. That was the first time I'd learned that word. And it's when someone is suffocated by hanging, choking, suffocation. It breaks these little blood vessels in that area, in your face or your neck. And the emergency room doctors at our hospital recognized that, and that's how she was caught. And after they started proceedings against her here, Texas, part of their investigation involved finding out about the deaths in Texas, and the authorities in Texas started investigating her also. And she is now on death row. Well, no, she pled out to get life in prison instead of the death sentence in Texas. So I assume she's still in custody in Texas somewhere. I don't think she's in Kansas. I think she's in Texas.
So a couple of questions related to that. You mentioned that word. I won't even try to pronounce it.
Yeah.
When you hear a word for the first time, and so not understanding exactly how the machine works or the process works.
Right.
what do you do? Yeah. How does that work?
Very good question. I thank you to so that I can clarify that. We write things the way they sound. It's shorthand. It's all phonetic. We write so petechiae. I would just write techiae, which would be 3 strokes. But then afterwards, I'd go look it up and figure out how it was spelled. And now I know. And so I would, if that came up again, I would develop a brief form for it so that I didn't have to write 3 strokes every time they said it. And I would be able to keep up easier. This is what our keyboard looks like.
Okay.
That's the actual letters.
Got it.
And so we write combinations of letters to make letters. The TK right here. If I press down those 2 keys at the same time, that's actually a D. And if I write it by itself, it's the word did. And the T, the S here, it's backwards for me. So
sure.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, no, your finger's on it, on the S.
Right there.
Right.
Yeah. Here, this S is the word is also, if it's by itself, or I actually write it with S-E. If I write, press those 2 keys at one time, it's is he. So that's kind of gives you an idea what shorthand is about. And we have to use combinations of keys to make punctuation also. This right here, the FPLT, that's a period, and we have to identify who's speaking. If I press down all the keys over here, that's the plaintiff, that's the question. And all the keys over here is an answer.
Is that standard, or do you make up your own keystrokes for your own words or combinations?
Well, there's definitely more than one type of theory out there. And so we don't all write the same way. That's for certain.
Okay.
But some of it's pretty basic, like the vowel. These are the beginning sounds, and these are the ending sounds, and the vowels are in the middle, which is our thumbs. And EU is the letter I, and that's across the board for everyone. That's, so it's like, and you can press down all the keys at once, which is what makes it very much different from a typewriter. It's a shorthand machine. It's you can press down all the keys at one time, which is how we can write words at a time. Like K, A, T, we can write all that at once. And there is no C. There's an S and a K because C always sounds like S or K.
Oh, wow.
So if you write K-A-T, that's the word cat.
Okay. I'm pretty sure this program would take me about 10 years.
Oh, no. I always tell, anytime I speak to anyone about it, students in particular, I always tell them that anyone can learn the shorthand. The hard part is getting fast enough.
And so to practice that, and I still have another question about the courtroom, but
sure.
To practice that, do you watch TV shows or listen to recordings and then just type what you hear, or what was the best way to practice your speed?
We part of schooling is dictation classes. When I was in school, I was in dictation. After I learned the theory, I was in dictation classes 4 hours a day. And you have to transcribe some of that. But yeah, you're practicing. Yeah. That's the name of the game, to get faster. And yeah, you just, and you do have other classes besides just the court reporting classes. You've got to take English and just different basic classes also,
Okay. So going back to the court and specifically that trial you mentioned, that's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And I know you said concentration is the key to get the right words, but emotionally, when you hear those types of things, does that add stress to the job, or is it just it's kind of a part of it's just a part of the job, and maybe people deal with it differently based on
Yeah. I think people do deal with it differently, but it is a stressor for sure. You know, yeah.
Do they prepare you for that in the training, or is it all technical? I mean, it's just this is how you do the job, and then I guess I don't know. Do they address that at all in the training, or is it not that big of a deal?
Well, they didn't address that in my training. I hope that they do nowadays, but I don't know that because I haven't been in a court reporting school for years.
Sure.
But there are, I don't know, you just learn to cope with it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the process then? So you type the words phonetically.
Yes.
Do you go back through, and then how does the transcript get made, if you will? Does your machine do that? Do you have to do something? How does that all work?
I, of course, I make the record, and we now have this machine I showed you is a computerized electronic machine. And I hook up my machine to a computer that has a software program on it that translates my steno into English in transcript form. And so it's there. I can read back if they need me to from that computer screen pretty easily. A lot easier than it used to be on the little ticker tape, kind of paper that we had. The machines don't even have paper anymore. They're just all electronic. And so that transcript is there, but it's a rough form. So then I go through that transcript and edit it and translate anything that the computer didn't translate and just clean it up. And then I print it out and proofread it also, make those corrections, and then I've got a completed transcript.
So if you had a 1 hour deposition, how much time on average would it take you to get that finished product back to the attorneys or the court or whomever?
A 1 hour deposition is probably going to be anywhere from 30 to 60 pages. 60 would be a lot, but in an hour, that would mean they were talking pretty fast. But I could probably get that transcript completed in 8 hours.
Okay.
Pretty easily.
Okay.
And
what is the
short.
longest amount of time that you spent at the machine, either in a deposition or a court? What's the longest you've done, and what is the most comfortable?
Well, depositions can start at 9 o'clock and end at 5, or you can end up being there for longer than 8 hours, 8 to 10, 12 hours. But I know that other reporters in other parts of the country, that happens to them. But in this area, 8 to 10 hours is probably the longest. I have had, it's been a long time since I've had one that's lasted that long. Well, that's not true. I was pretty busy from July to Thanksgiving, and had a lot of depositions that that were like 250 pages a day in one day. And those I can edit 80 to 120 pages in a day.
Hmm.
More if it's a long day, if I spend longer than 8 or 10 hours. But I was working pretty crazy hours there for those 4 months. But now it's been slow, so I'm able to catch up on other things.
And maybe it's a different motion, but is carpal tunnel a job hazard? Especially if you're doing 8 hours of that a day.
Yes. There are a lot of court reporters that have had problems with carpal tunnel. I had surgery on my elbows. Mine was ulnar nerve entrapment. It's a different nerve. It's the median nerve at your wrist. It's the ulnar nerve at your elbows. I had that surgery 30 years ago, right. and I'm still at it.
Is there anything you can do, like exercises or anything like that
yes.
can help? Okay.
Yes. And I also go to a massage therapist that's very good, and chiropractor, and those things. And things are, understand that when I started this profession, ergonomics was not a thing, and it is now. And the machines, when I started, were manual machines, and it's the difference. It's the same as the difference between a manual typewriter and an electric typewriter. And so I wore myself out a little bit on a manual machine before I had an electronic machine.
Right.
And so it doesn't take near as long. It used to take a lot longer to produce a transcript than it does now too. Thank heaven.
You mentioned that you're doing freelance and have done freelance for several years, and that gives you more flexibility. It seems like, based on what you said, especially your schedule July through Thanksgiving, that you have as much work as you want if you're willing to travel.
Yes.
And you mentioned your territory. What are some of the are there other advantages? That seems like a pretty good one, just flexibility
yes.
of being freelance. Are there any disadvantages of freelance that you've seen? I mean, you've been doing it, so for you, it probably works best, but what would someone else think might be a disadvantage of that?
Well, I'll just explain the advantages and disadvantages of being an official and of being a freelance. And I will also mention that closed captioning, that is done by court reporters also. But an officialship, the reason I wanted to have an officialship after I'd freelanced for 3.5 years in San Antonio is I wanted a steady paycheck and the benefits. I talked about that earlier. And that's and you get a salary, but you also get paid a page rate for any transcripts you produce when you work at a courthouse. The disadvantage is someone else is in charge of your schedule, the judge. And when I left the courthouse, my children were young, and I'm very grateful for the fact that I left when I did, because I didn't miss a single ball game or concert or track meet or anything while my kids were growing up. And I was able to be home a lot, working on transcripts when they would get home on the bus and what have you, or I was in control of my schedule. And I've actually made more money as a freelance reporter than I did as an official. But there are times that when it's pretty lean, when I don't have any control over how busy I'm going to be, I can't make them contact me and set up depositions when I'm sitting idle. That's the disadvantage, is that it's up to the legal profession as to when they're going to take depositions. And and such.
Sure.
And captioning, that's another area. Those reporters that do that, they sit at home in an office like I have at home and in their pajamas and listen to a newscast or a football game and write that, and it goes through the internet, of course, and back to the station, and that closed captioning. That's how that's produced.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
And wow. How does someone get into the captioning? Is that a direct relationship with the television station or the network, or is it a company that then contracts with the TV stations or whatever?
It is a company that contracts with the TV stations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've never done that. I have friends that do, but that's, they contacted those companies and got a job that way with them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we have a program at Holcomb High School, and we also have a couple of programs in Garden City. So we need to have you, if you have time, go in and talk to our students about this, just as you became interested in it through someone talking to you as a high school student. But what are some other ways that someone could get information? You mentioned the National Association has a website. Are there other sources of information that would be helpful for someone who may be interested in exploring this profession?
Well, the thing that I recommend the most is to Google Discover Steno, and that should take you to National Court Reporters Association's website, where they have a program called A to Z. And you do have to have a shorthand machine in order to go through this. I think it's 3 weeks, maybe 4-week program, like 2 or 3 nights a week. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but you go through this program, and there are shorthand machines out there to borrow, to rent, to, I even have one that I would allow a prospective student to borrow to go through the A to Z program. And it teaches them a little bit about the keyboard and the steno, and it helps them to just try it out and see if it's something that they would be interested in. I highly recommend that. That's been a very effective tool the last several years for our profession to get new students involved in court reporting.
And if they don't have access to you, how much does it cost approximately to rent a machine for 3 months?
And I said rent. There are so many court reporters out there that have donated machines for that purpose. You're not going to have to rent a machine. I shouldn't have even said that.
Okay.
There's plenty of shorthand machines out there that are available for a student to use.
Okay. Great. So you've obviously been doing this for a long time, and it's something that you've I mean, you're an advocate for the position, so you obviously love it. What is the demand right now for court reporters or closed captioning folks?
The demand is through the roof. We have nationwide, and I'm living proof that you can live anywhere and make a living at this profession. I live in Holcomb, which is a 3A school. People live here because it's a 3A school instead of their children going to Garden City to a 6A school. Although, there's nothing wrong with Garden City High School.
Right. We understand.
But I mean, this is where I work, right here, where I am right now. Of course, like I said, I drive all over also, but yeah, the demand is huge, and I'm one of only two. Well, now there's three freelance court reporters west of a line from Wichita to Salina in Kansas, and one of those is in Northwest Kansas. And the only reason she's available as a freelance reporter now is because she's retired as their official reporter after 45 years of working at the courthouse. So now the judicial system in that judicial district does not have a reporter at all. Here in Garden City, our judicial district, there used to be 4 court reporters. Now there's 1. Liberal, there used to be 3. Now there's 0. Dodge City used to have 3. Now there's 1. Another judicial district in this area, Larned, Kinsley, that judicial district, they've been without a court reporter for 6 or 7 years because their reporter retired. And then she liked the profession so much, she moved to Omaha, where her mom and her sisters lived, and took a job at the courthouse in Omaha. So she went back to work after being retired for just a couple of years, just in a different location. And so that just gives you an idea how wide open this field is. You can freelance or be an official anywhere, just pretty much anywhere. Wow. Especially in the state of Kansas, because I'm more aware of what's going on in Kansas than I am other states. But
sure. But it sounds like you could travel to other states. There's probably work there.
Absolutely.
I would guess
nationwide.
Unique in that regard. So
correct.
Well, Cindy, thank you so much for spending time. I told you it'd last about 30 minutes, but you've got so many interesting stories and it's an interesting career path that probably a lot of people don't know about, or at least the intricacies of it. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else you think is important that we didn't talk about that you wanted to communicate with our students and listeners?
The salary range, I think we should mention that.
Perfect.
I think an official starting salary is, I think, around $50,000. And that, like I said, you also get paid for the transcripts you produce. But so I'm going to say that the salary range, the income range for court reporters as a whole is anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000 a year that you can make.
Well, if you're looking for a high demand, high paying job that you can be prepared for in maybe a year, depending on the program and how dedicated you are to it, this sounds like a great opportunity. And we appreciate your telling us about some of the sources to get more information. And hopefully we can get you to visit with some of those local programs, given your schedule. But yeah. I think it'd be cool too, maybe even to get a demonstration. I don't know if that's something that you're able to do, but to see you in action and the keystrokes and explain it. It's nice to see it on a video, but in person is pretty cool too. So Cindy, yes. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing this with us. And hopefully we'll continue to stay in contact and we'll get some court reporters from the JAG-K program.
That sounds great.
Thanks for watching Espresso Yourself with Chuck. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will subscribe to the channel and also check out all the videos on our Jobs for America's Graduates Kansas YouTube site. Music for Espresso Yourself with Chuck is provided by Bensound Music at bensound.com. Thank you to our announcer, Kelly Newton, and producers Kim Ferdig and Don Meir.